Welcome to Training Unleashed, the show that will help you design and deliver training that's off the chain and will make a difference. Now, here's your host, Evan Hackel.
Today, we are very fortunate to have with us Dan Black, who heads up client engagement at Tortal Training. Dan is a true professional in the area of training. Dan, please, if you wouldn't mind, give everyone a little feel for your background.
Evan, thank you for that. And it's a real pleasure to be here. I've been in the training and talent development and learning space. Probably just had a passion for it since I was a little kid and actually started a tutoring business in high school. But from a professional perspective, I really started the career professionally at Bank of America on the tech and ops side of things, building gap assessments for all their technologists, which transitioned me actually in an unusual turn of events to the real estate industry. So started working for a real estate company and realized that there was a big gap between getting your real estate license and understanding how to really run a real estate business. So started a training program there after I had bought the company from the people that I was working for and built that organization up to about 63 agents and 3 offices here in Charlotte. So that transitioned into a career going around the country and teaching brokers and agents the information that I was already teaching my agents. And then was fortunate enough after about 2 or 3 years of being out there and learning in the community to connect with Cordell and yourself here at Tortal, and been here for 3 years ever since.
I know this, and you know this, but our saying, our mission is to make effective training easier. And I think one of the most important keys to training is effective training. So what does it mean when we say make effective training easier?
So when we make effective training easy, we start with 2 questions. Who is your learner, the audience, who are you going to try and communicate with? And what do you want them to be able to do when they're done with this information? And so that addresses 2 things. First of all, the type of learner that you're going to be dealing with, which can oftentimes be varied, but also typically has some trends. And the way different, people learn the same, but the way they take and process information can be a little bit different. And it can vary by age, area of the country, type of profession that they're in. And then what they're trying to accomplish speaks to the leadership team of the organization. Because typically someone in training is going to be held accountable for a budget. And when organizations spend money on budget, they want to make sure that training is actually moving the needle somewhere inside of the organization.
We have another saying here at Tortal Training, which is we want to be the champions of training. And part of who and what we are as a culture is to openly share. So what I'd like you to do right now, Dan, is to share the secret sauce. Talk about how do we actually go and help organizations define what they need so they're focusing on the right things, matching up the right kind of training. We have a lot of training professionals here, a lot of people that could be could do their jobs in a much more effective way if we shared with them the process we go through.
I think that probably the first secret sauce is, not to get stuck in the training space. I think our good friend Jeffrey Gitomer said it best, get out of your own head and get out of your own space. I spend a lot of time looking into different organizations, ISPI, SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, Hackerspace, which is a tech startup. There's an innovation and creativity group here, business innovation and growth. So getting out of just strictly the training space and training methodologies, I think lends to the secret sauce significantly. And then being involved in your own industry as well. Coming off of a year as the president for the Association for Talent Development here in Charlotte, and now the past president, and been involved with that board in a leadership position for 5 or 6 years. And just learning from the other professionals in that environment has really changed the course of how I approach or how I tackle certain problems. It just adds more and more tools to your toolkit. And as far as our secret sauce is concerned, it's really never stop improving, but don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Go out there and we take a little bit from the startup world. We fail early, we fail often. So we'll get out there and we'll try something, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, we make an adjustment and go forward from there. So I would say part of the secret sauce is getting out of your head. And then the other part is don't try to develop it all at once. There's an entire movement in our industry where we're moving to more of a rapid curriculum design, the successive approximation model. And we're moving away from all of these methodologies that have been around for a while, but with the advent of technology and tools, we can approach the same problems in a different manner.
Can you share some examples?
Video training right now is just a massive organization. Largest video-based training platform in the world is YouTube. If it isn't on YouTube, chances are it can't be taught. And YouTube is great for learning certain types of things, and for a self-motivated learner who's out there and they want to, for instance, like my 6-year-old making a rainbow loom, the star pattern, or when I had to take care of my neighbor's pool and I just YouTubed how to take care of a pool, and sure enough, there was a nice Jen out there teaching me how to do it, and I watched the YouTube and rewound it step by step. So video-based training can be an extremely powerful tool, but at the end of the day, it's not right for everything. So you have to look at how often does the information change? Where is the information going to be accessed? Who's going to be accessing the information? When are they going to need the information? And so video-based training has a time, it has a place, but if your information is going to change on a quarterly basis, you don't want to build video-based training.
Training Unleashed is brought to you by Tortal Training, specializing in e-learning and interactive online training solutions for corporate, government, nonprofit, and franchise organizations. Tortal makes effective training easier. Just go to tortal.net to gain access to real-world tools that can make a difference. That's tortal.net, Tortal, tortal.net.
Can you talk a little bit about the Dakin process, what a Dakin is, and why they're critical?
The Dakin process has been around for a long time. The process we use is more of what's called a rapid curriculum design process, but it is based on the Dakin process, which has been around since the 1980s. And the nuts and bolts of the process is that you are identifying a body of knowledge that an individual needs to know in order to educate them. The third step in learning. There's training, here's what you need to do a process. There's learning, here's some information that I can give you that you can apply to multiple situations. And then there's education, here's mastering of an environment or a role. So in that higher learning, it was really used in colleges and secondary schools, was to define those curriculums. We've added some other elements to the process going back to, things that we've seen and grabbed in other spaces. So there's empathy mapping, where you really start to understand who your learner is and the type of information that they know. And so there's 2 exercises that we take from the marketing space where we're really scoping out and understanding who our learner is. And then a piece from the Dakin process, which is the duty task or competency task matrix, where we define what are the things that the individual has top of mind day in and day out in their role, and then what are the tasks that they need in order to accomplish it. And we typically stay away from things like leadership and management and more of those higher level concepts, and we get really down into the nuts and bolts of what's the information that the individual needs to master in order to be at peak performance. And then with an organization, we can actually source all of that, or in some learning environments, it's called a gap analysis. We understand what information exists. Currently, it's documented either in a PowerPoint or a procedure manual or some form of information. But then also, what's institutional knowledge? For instance, this information exists only in Evan's head. We call that a gap, but we actually source it. And so we understand what's the tribal knowledge that's being passed back and forth inside of the organization is never really being documented, and also may not be being delivered with any level of consistency. And if it's really critical, then it's important that the consistency is there. So what's the tribal knowledge? What's the institutional knowledge? What's the knowledge that just doesn't exist because the organization's never really recognized it as important to teach somebody? And then after that, we understand impact to their performance. So we use a criticality matrix, a rubric from agile learning methodologies that helps the audience assess the criticality. But then we also give each of the elements a weighted value, because we need to understand how frequently is the learner performing that particular task. Is this something that's happening multiple times a day? Is this something that's happening quarterly? Because obviously that's going to impact how important it is for the learner to know and be able to master that task early. And then we're also understanding how frequently the information changes. So there's also a rubric for that as well, where you really weight it, and then you get a weighted value, and then the organization really starts to understand not only what information they have, but what information needs to be created. And then after that, what is the best information to teach the learner first based on their experience coming into the role, and then also what's the delivery channel. We'd like to call it the 4 rights of training. You're delivering the right information to the right person at the right time through the right medium. The most common scenario that we run into is an organization that has been around for a long time, so over 40 or 50 years. And it's not like they haven't been doing training for 40 or 50 years. They've probably amassed a massive amount of training. With one organization, I think we found 467 different training documents. For one of the tasks that we documented, there was actually 7 different ways that they were teaching it, all the same task. So for the organization that's been around for a long time, the process is beneficial because they can map what their current environment looks like. And that's probably a critical point here, is that the folks that are in the room aren't the people who think they know what the learner needs. This is where we take a technique from innovation and creativity. We need to understand the reality of the situation. So we have business matter experts in the room, people who are doing the job, yesterday or the day before, and they're doing it well. And we try to have a diversity of perspectives. So maybe someone who's a top performer in the role and they're new, someone who's been there a while, and then that person that everybody in the organization goes to because they know everything. They've probably forgotten more about the role than most people have learned. So that being said, once you have that, those type of folks in the room, you really get a good flavor for the information that you're going to be extrapolating from. There's always typically some surprises. So in the older organization, we can validate what information is still important, map it to mature content that they already have, so they're not recreating the wheel yet again, and then also identify those critical gaps so the organization can fill them. And typically an organization that's been around for a long time has been doing something for so long, they haven't really considered doing it a different way.
We're so glad you're listening to this episode of Training Unleashed, brought to you by Tortal Training. The difference between Tortal Training and other online training companies is we're primarily a training company with technology, rather than a technology company that does training. Want to find out more? Just go to tortal.net. That's Tortal, tortal.net.
How do organizations determine whether or not they want to do training inside or outside, or a combination of both? I know that's a loaded question because we're obviously in the business of providing training services to companies. But from your experience, how would a company identify what they're looking to do and how they're looking to do it?
Yeah, and that answer varies from organization to organization, obviously. For some organizations, our team are fractional chief learning officers for those organizations. And we report to someone inside of operations or inside of HR, and we essentially perform the function of their entire training department. And these are organizations that have decided they want to focus on their business and making their business better, and that they want that to be their primary focus. They don't necessarily want to go through the time and the trouble of recruiting the level of talent, not only that exists on the team, but also in our production environment. And they know the pains that come along with recruiting folks in this space and the cost that comes along with recruiting folks in this space. and then also the cost that comes along with maintaining a staff in this space. And they're at a point in their revenue or in their business growth where it makes more sense to allow an organization to handle this function for them. And then the second part is, we have internal staff. We're of a size that we have internal staff that are driving maybe the strategy of this entire function. They're looking at the learning and development, the succession planning, the onboarding. They've got some higher end tools, but these internal staff don't necessarily want to hire a team of production folks. And so that staff will outsource their production, which makes a lot of sense, because keeping an internal staff up to date on, the tools that are available, it can just be really time consuming and expensive for an organization. And sometimes it's just not the best use of their resources. And so for a lot of folks, our team is about helping them understand what the possibilities are. So, yes, here's what you're trying to accomplish. And I know you came to us and you said you wanted sales training, but why don't you let our organization go and watch some of your top performers to see if it's really sales training that you need? And lo and behold, it wasn't really sales training. It was really just a procedural or a process training. Those top performers were doing some critical things that just made them more effective in their job. Every single one in their organization who was a customer service rep had good communication, good sales skills. What they didn't have were those little tips and tricks of the trade that made these folks that much more effective from a process perspective. So we help that individual who's maybe controlling a function, not only do the right thing, but then also provide them with the temporary bandwidth that they need in order to get it done. Whether it's, instructor-led design and development, video production can be extremely expensive and it's tough to do well. So evaluating whether or not that is done internally, or if it's a customer-facing type of solution, if you're doing some form of educational marketing, you want to have your production a little bit higher than a YouTube video, depending on what sort of business you're in. So it's extra bandwidth for those folks. And for a lot of folks, we're really just a resource because we do partner with so many other thought leaders in this space because of the varying levels of projects that we get. A lot of my calls are, hey, Dan, do you know a person who does X, X, or X? And chances are, I'm going to know somebody who does that.
So let's quickly shift gears here and let's talk a little bit about e-learning itself and sort of what are kind of the best-in-class people doing who are doing e-learning. How does gameplay enter into that? And, sort of the key things that you're seeing for effective e-learning.
The medium tends to matter a little bit less. It's not irrelevant versus the design. So when we're doing an e-learning, we're really focused on the design and we're engaging the learner. And there's some critical components there, some rules that we're really just trying to follow. The first rule addresses that cognitive load theory where you can only teach somebody so much in a given period of time. So, we've all sat through that page turner, that PowerPoint with the voiceover that's 45 minutes long, or that the learner reads and they just hit the next button, next button, next button. And up until 7 years ago, or even 4 years ago, those are the limitations of it wasn't limitations of the technology. It was just really expensive to get anything more engaging than that. Whereas costs for development have come down significantly. And now there's instructional designers who are really doing some brilliant work designing engaging e-learning, which, first of all, is chunked into smaller pieces of information. Think of it like going around traffic. You may get there at the same time, but you're moving, so your mind thinks there's progress. So you're better off having 4 segregated e-learning objects inside of a course of a learning management system than you are having one 45-minute lesson. We're also, doing what, we attack through all the modalities, and the modalities are how people absorb information. So I'm reading, I'm seeing things visually, I'm hearing them reinforced, and then I am interacting digital kinesically. So I'm pointing, I'm clicking, I'm dragging, I'm dropping, and I'm having to think about things. And typically we're trying to make sure that the learner is having some sort of interaction on the screen, pointing, clicking, hitting all 3 of those every 37 seconds. so that there really isn't a lot of time for them to, get distracted or sit back or think about, why am I doing this? We just want to have them involved in that. And then there's a lot of, just games that you can play. For us, we try to simplify games. And my personal belief, based on a webinar that we did where we made our own game in less than 45 minutes and everybody thought it was great. And to my knowledge, some people are still using the game that we designed. Games have rules. Games have an end game, a goal. Games typically have some sort of story that goes along with them. And then there's also risk and reward. So the elements of gaming are still being talked about right now as the industry starts to focus on, incorporating games into your learning. But this sort of concept's been around forever and a day. The first game I think is on record in a business one is where Charles Schwab was trying to get his steel mill to perform more. And all he did was take a piece of chalk and draw a 4 on the ground. And when the night shift came in, the night shift said, "What's the 4 for?" And he said, "That's how many units the day crew turned out." And they said, "Well, we can do more than 4. So in the morning, the day crew saw a 5 on the floor. And they're like, "What's the 5 for?" They're like, "That's how many units the night crew did." And back and forth it went until that was the top producing site in his arsenal. And it's that simple game. There's competition, and you go back and forth. It's a human nature thing. So
I don't think it was Charles Schwab, but I have heard the story and I believe it to be true. And it's a great story. Dan, let's talk about personal development. I admire you a lot, and you're one of the most knowledgeable people I know in the area of training. What advice would you give to somebody that says, I want to improve my skills? What would you, are there books to read, organizations to join, maybe a combination thereof? What are the things for personal development advice would you give people? I
always tell folks it's get away from saying training, because training comes with a certain amount of, just baggage. And not a lot of people wake up in the morning excited for a day of training. And so, I move it to be a talent developer. At the most recent conference that we were at, I think at IFA, it wasn't about being the person out in front leading the charge. It was about having the mindset of a gardener, that you're growing these individuals and you're making them better. So I think that's the first part, is understand that you're in the talent development industry. And then after that, be a part of that industry as a lifelong learner. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're not constantly improving yourself, your skills are going to stagnate and become obsolete. And so that also requires maybe getting a little bit out of the box. So not only, read all the seminal books, but what are the seminal books? Yeah, sure. So Telling Ain't Training is out there. The new book, Leaving Addy for Sam, The Successive Approximation Model. These are some books that are going to really help you in your career. But then I would also look to some other books. So look at Chip and Dan Heath's book, Made to Stick. That's all about making messages sticky. And if you are hearing a lot about the storytelling component that's in training right now, Chip and Dan Heath wrote that book for the storytelling component from a marketing perspective and how to move things inside of an organization. I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink's, repackaging of To Sell is Human. That'll help you as an individual sell your organization on why it's good to do something. It's a spot that we fail in a lot from an industry perspective. If you read those 4 books, you'll be pretty well armed, and then after that, it'll probably just blossom from there, because all 4 of those books will lead to different things inside of an organization. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking your time today to listen and participate. I want to thank Dan for, I would say, really, truly great and high-quality content. Appreciate it, and everyone have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity, Evan.
This has been Training Unleashed, but it doesn't stop here. Just go to trainingunleashed.net to subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll be well on your way to delivering training programs that are off the chain. We'll talk to you next time on Training Unleashed.